this happened just a couple of months ago. It was the weekend and I was up late watching TV. I was in the living room of my apartment and relaxing after a long day of work. My apartment is not that big. It's basically one giant room with a kitchen at the front by the door and then the living room past that. I think that's a pretty standard setup. Then there's one bathroom and one bedroom off of that down the tiny hallway. So as I sat there feeling relaxed and having an ice-cold drink, I suddenly heard a knock at my apartment door. I didn't know who would possibly be there because I obviously was not expecting anybody. I looked over to the door but did not bother to get up. I figured that it was probably a mistake. Maybe somebody was trying to go to another apartment. After maybe 20 seconds, they knocked again. Then I heard a younger man's voice say, "DoorDash." Now, I did not order anything on DoorDash. In my mind, this was a simple mistake. One of my neighbors must have ordered food, and the delivery guy simply had his address mistaken. So I got up from the couch and started walking over to the door. My plan was to just tell the guy that he had the wrong place and to double-check the address. When I got to the door, I opened it. But as soon as I did, I saw that there was not just one guy there, but there was 3 men. They were all dressed in dark clothing and had sweatshirts and jackets with hoods up. My door was open for literally half a second, and as soon as I started to open it, I thought better of it and began to close it. The main guy right at the door then went forward and tried to stop me, but he must have realized that he would have gotten the door slammed on his arm because he almost reached in and then didn't. After I slammed my door shut, I very quickly locked it. Pretty much the next second, the guy tried to open the door. Then I heard the other 2 guys get closer. They kept trying to open the door and then they started banging on it and kicking it as well. It was really loud and I thought that the door might break. So I quickly ran into the other room and then I got my phone and dialed 911. But the guys banging and trying to break in did not last long, because within probably a minute it stopped. Then I heard them all running away down the hallway. I told the police what was going on and they said they would have an officer there shortly. And the cops arrived pretty quick. It was probably within like 5 minutes. However, by that time, the men were all gone. I'm not sure where they went, but they were no longer in the apartment complex. I assumed that it was an attempted robbery, but I don't know why they picked me. My apartment is just like all the others. I'm not rich or anything, so maybe it was just random. I'm just glad that I had fast instincts to close the door as soon as I had opened it, or else I think they might have barged their way in. I have a horror story from Snapchat that happened just last year. I use Snapchat quite a bit and communicate with friends on there a lot. I post stories pretty frequently as well. I've had Snapchat for almost 10 years and over time have accumulated lots of friends on the app. When I post a story, sometimes friends will reply to them and say whatever. Now, starting last year, every time I posted a story, this one guy would seem to reply to it. I didn't really know who he was, but his name on Snapchat was Dave. I don't have any idea when exactly he added me or anything, but he would say things that were sort of creepy. Like one, for example, that stood out was when I posted a picture of my new apartment. The picture was just of like the living room and kitchen. He responded saying, "I wish I knew where you lived." It was almost like he was trying to be weird. I never bothered to delete him or anything because I didn't think it was too much of a problem. He never snapped me outside of responding to my stories, but eventually I got tired of it and deleted him. I didn't really think anything of it after doing so, but the next day, a new account added me on Snapchat. I didn't know that it was him making another account. I added him back out of curiosity because I had no idea who it was. Then, he sent me a snap asking why I deleted him. I then realized who it was and then deleted that account. Not too long after that, he tried to add me again with another one, but I did not add him back. He was using different usernames, but I knew that it was still him. The very next day, I got a text on my phone from a number that I did not recognize. It just said, "Hi," and I asked who it was. It took until like the 3rd text for me to realize that it was the same guy. He started cursing me out, calling me terrible things, and was clearly very angry how I kept ignoring him. I blocked the number after he sent me about 20 texts in the span of 2 minutes. However, this couldn't stop him either. As most of you know, there are apps and websites where you can get new phone numbers for free. I've really never used one, but I know that they exist. I'm guessing that's what this guy was doing, because I got another text a while later. It was very clearly still him. I blocked this number too. Then, a while later, there was another new number. This time, though, he left a voicemail. I listened to it, and the man sounded much older than me. He basically called me every name in the book and then threatened me. I blocked his number. This continued for several days. I tried to ignore it as best as I could and just kept blocking his numbers. Soon, though, I decided to get a new phone. I sort of needed one anyways, and decided to get a new number as well. I also changed my Snapchat username. After that, I never heard from the guy again. Hopefully it stays that way.
I live in a small country where things still go bump in the night, and that doesn't go for just creepy local legends. Dark strangers, cartels, I think you get the idea. Where I live, nowhere is truly removed from the day-to-day dangers of the unknown. It was a dark night. I found myself home alone. Here, it isn't uncommon for the entire family to live together. Grandparents, parents, children, grandchildren will all share a growing piece of property for wealth and security. It's the simplest way to live. But as you can imagine, being home alone is a rarity. With so many people under one roof, it's almost impossible to time anything just right to ever be actually alone. So I did what I always do. I hooked up the surround sound throughout the living room and turned out all the lights. I bundled up on the couch with my favorite snack and watched whatever I desired on the big family television. Despite the ever-present danger I mentioned earlier, I remember the evening being quite relaxing. Rain and a breeze moved in along the coast and created a pitter-patter against the roof. As the night went on, I thought I heard someone at the front door. As I moved to investigate, the sound and movement stopped. But being a stormy night, and that I had the sound up so loud, I truly in my heart believed I'd simply heard something that wasn't there. I turned back to the movie and did my best to relax. That's when the back door began to rattle. I adjust myself on the sofa to get a better look. When someone starts to knock, a frantic, heavy banging against the hard wood. I froze in place. Whatever I dismissed as storm sounds, or maybe just the junk blowing around in the backyard, is now undeniable. There's someone trying to come inside the house. Everyone who lives there naturally has a key. Whoever is outside the door clearly does not. At the time, I'm an 18-year-old man. I'm running through the logical scenarios in my head. Whoever this is, they tried to open up the front door, then slip around the side of the house and is now trying to force the back door open. This isn't cartel or a monster. Anything with real bloodlust would have forced the front door open. I reasoned that it's a common thief, probably someone very nervous and trying to remain unseen. Being 18, I decided to take them head on and show the world this asshole picked the wrong house. I moved from the couch to the kitchen, grabbed the biggest cleaver I can find. 10 inches of dingy, ugly steel. Still, the door handle is twisting back and forth. Go time. I have no idea what's going to happen, but I'm down for whatever. There's nothing like the mentality of a teenager. "You don't know who you're messing with," I shouted through the door. The stranger on the other side stopped shaking the handle for a moment. "I know you're out there. You have 3 seconds to get the out of here, or I'll cut you up." They didn't care. The knocking started again, even harder than before. My confidence quickly faded. I took a deep breath and readied myself. In my head, this was do or die. Hoisting the cleaver over my head, I unfastened the bolt and threw open the door before me. It wasn't a burglar or a gangster of any kind. It was my sweet little grandma. She stood there soaking wet with an expression of agitation, but also unmistakable terror. "What are you doing?" she shouted at me. "Me? What are you doing at the back door?" I asked. "I thought you were an intruder." "Oh, no." She laughed as she stepped inside the house. I went and paused the television while she shut her coats by the door. She explained that she'd gotten home during the storm, tried knocking for a while. That was the noise I heard at the front door. I guess she knocked for quite a while because she finally gave up and decided to try the back door. The front entrance has a little cover, so she figured that even if it were locked, at least she would be out of the rain. That's when I started to hear the commotion and decided to go to war with whatever was outside. Glad I didn't though, because I seriously almost killed my grandma.
This happened just last summer. I live by myself in what I would describe as a typical apartment. I have one bedroom, a bathroom, kitchen, and living room pretty much. It's inside of a building in a fairly large apartment complex. So one night, I worked sort of late into the night at my job. I was really tired from the long day and pretty much just arrived home, took a quick shower, and went to bed. That was around midnight. However, I woke up at roughly 4 o'clock in the morning. Obviously, I wanted to get more sleep, but I was wide awake. I was also very thirsty and felt dehydrated. Sometimes, mostly in the summer, I wake up in the night because of dehydration, and obviously on this night I had worked late and not been able to drink as much. Then usually I drink some water and feel better immediately and then go right back to sleep. But some of the times when I wake up, I'm wide awake and can't go back to sleep right away. And this was one of those times. So what I usually do when that happens is get up and go into the living room and watch TV until I get sleepy again. That might be 15 or 30 minutes usually. So that was what I did on this night. I got out of bed, drank some water, immediately felt better, and then sat on the couch and turned on the TV. My couch is to the right of the front door to the apartment, about 20 feet away. I remember that when I sat down, I glanced over and happened to notice that my door was actually unlocked. I realized that I somehow had forgotten to lock it. Normally, I always remember, but I guess I forget sometimes. I went over and locked the door and then went back to the couch. I started watching TV and waited for myself to feel sleepy again. I was flipping around the channels for maybe 5 minutes when suddenly I heard a noise. Obviously, it was very quiet other than the noise from the TV, but the sound I heard was somebody trying to open the front door to my apartment. I really couldn't believe it, and I had no idea who it could be. I sat and listened, but didn't hear anything else. Then, after a moment, I got up and I walked over to the door. I looked out of the peephole, but nobody was there. Then I opened up my apartment door and looked into the hallway. That's when I saw him. There was a man wearing a hooded sweatshirt walking away from me down the hallway. He was mostly looking down at the ground, and then he went to another door and tried opening it, but this one was also locked. I watched him go to another door and try that one as well. Apparently, he hadn't noticed me opening the door. I didn't know who this guy was, but he was seemingly trying to get into any apartment. As he reached the end of the hallway, he suddenly looked behind him and then he saw me. When he did, I quickly closed the door. I was afraid that he would come back, but he didn't. Soon after, I went back to bed. I'm really glad that I woke up when I did that night and locked my door, or who knows what could have happened. I work at Starbucks, and something happened a few weeks ago that really freaked me out. For a little background, I'm an 18-year-old female and have worked at Starbucks for about 6 months. So I was working until close one day, and I was behind the counter making drinks for most of the time. For much of the shift, I was kept pretty busy. I didn't really notice many of the people that would be sitting around inside. Our location is large enough that there's a good amount of tables and seats. It's fairly popular for people to bring their laptops and work and things like that. At one point, I noticed a few of the people sitting around. One of them was this guy sitting alone at a table on his laptop. He was probably about middle-aged, had dark hair, and was wearing a blue jacket. When I noticed him, he was staring at me. He didn't look away though when I saw him. I had to look away because it was weird. But then I just kept working and I didn't think about the guy or look over in his direction anymore. Hours later though, when things quieted down significantly, I was not quite as busy. At that point, I noticed the very few people that were still inside. I think there were just 2 or 3 people sitting around. One of them was the same guy from earlier, and when I noticed him, he was staring at me again and once more did not look away. It was almost unsettling how weird it seemed to me. I also thought that it was weird at first how he had been there for so long, but I guessed it wasn't that strange for people to work all day in a coffee shop after all. As we approached closing time, it was now just me and another coworker. The other customers soon left, but the man remained. The closer it got to closing time, the more nervous I was. Was he just going to keep sitting here past close? Thankfully, with about 5 minutes left before we closed for the night, I saw him getting up to leave. Then he walked out the door, and I felt better. I stayed for a while longer until I was good to go. After I left work, I just drove straight home that night. The Starbucks is in an area with lots of other stores and restaurants right nearby, and it's always kind of busy over there. I live with my parents at their house, which is about a 10-minute drive from the Starbucks. So I drove home and then went inside. It was probably like 9 p.m. by that point. I just remember that maybe about 10 minutes or so after getting back, I noticed this car parked on the side of the street outside. It was pretty much across from our house, and the engine of the car was running. What was strange is that it's pretty unusual for cars to be parked on the side of our street. It's not really in the city, and everybody has large driveways. I saw the lights to the car turn off, and I just decided to go over to the window and look at it. When I got closer, I noticed that there was somebody inside the driver's seat. It looked just like the same guy who had been at the Starbucks staring at me. At first, I thought that I was paranoid thinking about the guy, and there was no way that it was really him. But then he looked over at the house. I saw him for like a second, and then I quickly ducked down so that he wouldn't see me. I realized in that moment that it was for sure the same guy. This kind of freaked me out, because of course I wondered if he had somehow followed me home or something. I went away from the window, and I didn't want him to see me or anything. But a short time later, my curiosity got the better of me, and I went back. Not only was the car still there, but the man was still in the driver's seat and appeared to be looking at me. I moved away from the window again and found my dad, who was thankfully still up. He decided to go outside and confront the man. However, as soon as my dad left the house and began to walk towards the car, it quickly drove away. I figured that was pretty incriminating and that he probably wasn't just there because he was lost or something. Since then, I have not seen the man, not in my neighborhood and not at Starbucks, and I'm really happy about that. I'm hoping that I never see him again. I live alone in a house that I'm renting in a fairly average neighborhood. I moved here last year and something really crazy happened shortly after. So it all started one day when I noticed this car parked a ways down the street. It was across from my house and a little ways down. It sort of stood out because it was a red car, so it got my attention. I went outside to get my mail at the end of the driveway, and I remember that as I did, I noticed that there was a man in the driver's seat of the red car. I found that strange because I had noticed the car out there like an hour earlier. So had he just been sitting in the car the whole time? When I saw the guy, he was not looking at me, but looking down at, I'm guessing, his phone. I just casually turned around and then walked back inside of my house. It didn't seem like too big of a deal to me or anything. So as it got later, the sun started to set. I was passing by the front of the house and I noticed the red car was still there. But also I could see that the man was still in the driver's seat. And then I saw that his driver's window was down and he appeared to be taking a picture of my house or something. His phone was out and sort of pointed in my direction. I didn't think that he could see me or anything, but I moved away just in case. Several minutes later, when I looked, he was finally gone. It was a pretty weird thing, but he was gone now, so I figured that was that. As strange as it might be, I just hoped that he would never return. But I was wrong. 2 nights later, I was at home by myself, and it was much later at night now. I didn't have work the next day, so I was staying up pretty late. I was in my bedroom, and I heard the sound of a loud bang coming from the back door. I got up and was instantly thinking that someone was trying to break in. After leaving my bedroom, I started to head towards the back door, but slowed down. I heard another loud bang and looked around to see if I had any kind of a weapon. I really didn't though. Maybe I am unprepared, but I just never thought that somebody would try to break into my house. I then heard whoever it was trying to open the back door to the house. Thankfully, it was locked. I went over and looked out of a window. I just barely saw what looked like a man there, but I couldn't really make out any details. Everything was happening so fast. For some reason, I did not call the police right away. Looking back, I don't know why. You would think that would be the first thing to go through my mind in that situation, but I guess you never know how you will react in certain situations until you get in them. So anyways, there I was at the back door with some guy trying to get in. I got this crazy spontaneous idea and took out my phone. No, I still did not dial 911. Instead, I went to YouTube and looked up a really loud and annoying alarm sound. I clicked on the first video, and thankfully I forgot to turn my volume up because an ad started playing. Then I skipped the ad and turned my volume all the way up and hit play. The annoying alarm started blaring, and thankfully it worked. The guy at my back door stopped trying to break in and he moved away. He then went back around the front and left my property. Then, after I calmed down a little, I finally came to my senses and dialed the police. They came out and looked around and saw some slight damage to my back door. I filled out a report and then the police left and said they would look around for the man. However, he was never found to my knowledge. I believe that it was the same man who I had seen days prior. I don't know for sure, but those two suspicious situations seem to be linked to me. Thankfully, nothing like that has happened since. I live alone in a house and have lived here for 2 years now. This is an event that took place several months back and is still very fresh in my memory. So it was nighttime and I was alone in my house and in my bedroom. The house is not very large and my room is on the ground level. As I was watching TV and sitting on my bed, it was starting to get late and was maybe 11 or 12. Because it was late, things were very quiet aside from the volume on my TV, which was not that loud. All of a sudden, I heard this noise from the back end of my house. It sounded like maybe from the backyard, and it seemed like somebody had hit a back window. Before I could compute what was going on in my head though, I heard glass breaking. The sound was coming from the same area. Then I knew that somebody was breaking in. My first reaction at that point was to run to my bedroom door and lock it, which I did. I heard whoever had gotten in the house was still at the back side of it. Then my next course of action was to dial 911. I went over and located my phone, which was also on my bed. I quickly scrambled to dial for the police. Then I went to the back corner of my room. As soon as someone answered the phone, I said that my house was being broken into. I gave my address, but I spoke as quietly as I could. I didn't really hear anything during that time as far as where the intruder was, but maybe 30 seconds later, I heard the footsteps approaching the hallway where my bedroom is. Then, moments later, they arrived right outside my door. I muted the phone and tossed it aside in a panic. I didn't want them to hear me. Then the intruder tried opening my bedroom door. That got me really scared because I had hoped that maybe they wouldn't want to be seen. I felt like they knew I was in here, but possibly they just wanted to see what was in the room. Maybe they just wanted to steal stuff. But now they were coming straight for me. After the door did not open from being locked, I heard a loud man's voice. He yelled for me to open the door now. It was very angry, and of course, I was not going to do that. After a few seconds, he banged on the door very hard 2 times. At that point, I just wanted to get out of there. I debated trying to open my bedroom window and jump out of it, or I could look around and see if I had anything to use as a weapon. I didn't really have much of anything though. I was heading over to the window and the guy started to walk away. Then I stopped. If he was leaving, I didn't want to run into him out of the house. I wasn't sure where he was going though or what he was doing, but I was just moving off of instincts at that point. My mind barely was even thinking at all. I don't even know how long this went on, but I was basically just pacing around and listening for the man. I didn't really hear much though. After I have no idea how long, I heard my back door opening. Then, probably like 30 seconds to a minute later, I heard noises out front. I still thought that it was the man, but it was actually the police. They came inside and I finally left my room. After searching the house, the man had left out the back door just a short time earlier. Some other cops searched the neighborhood and were able to find the man. He was caught just a block away, which made me feel 100 times better. I didn't know who he was or why he chose to break into my house. I'm really glad that my bedroom door had a lock on it though. If not, I'm not sure what would have happened. When I was in college during my junior year, I lived in a house with another guy. His name was Sam, and we had met the year prior in a class project. I had a good amount of friends in college, but I wasn't able to find a good living situation, because for a while I didn't know if I was going to be transferring schools or staying. I ended up staying, which I was happy about, but I was kind of late to find a place for the following year. It was pretty much a situation where I would have to live in the dorms again. But then the guy I had a class with kind of randomly asked me if I knew where I was living, and I said no. So he told me that he needed a roommate for a house that he was living in. I pretty much said yes right away. I felt like I had gotten lucky at the situation, and I didn't know Sam very well other than the class that we had together. We had never hung out or anything, but I figured that it would be fine. So the house was pretty small and old, but other than that it was better than the dorms. It had an upstairs with 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. Then downstairs was another bathroom, a kitchen, living room, and a dining room. After moving in, things started out fine. I didn't really do much with Sam, we mostly kept to ourselves, but I didn't have a problem with him at all, and he was cool. However, several months into living there, some strange things started happening. One night, I remember that I heard a door keep opening and closing downstairs. It was really weird. It was like it kept opening and then closing right away, non-stop. It creeped me out, so I got out of bed and went to look. By the time I got downstairs, though, nobody was there. It was so weird. I went back upstairs, and Sam's door was closed, so I assumed he was asleep. I didn't know how to explain the noise, but I was able to go back to bed a while later. Now, like a week or so after that, I remember that I was woken up to the sound of somebody knocking on my bedroom door. I thought that it had to be Sam, obviously. After waking up, I asked what he wanted, but he didn't answer me. I got up and went over to the door and opened it, but nobody was there. It was really strange. Then, later on, one time when I was doing homework late at night, I heard footsteps downstairs. I assumed that it was Sam, but then he texted me asking if I was downstairs. When I said no, he said that he heard someone down there. I did as well, and it really creeped me out. So I remember that we both went downstairs and looked all around, but didn't find anyone. It was really strange, and we even considered calling the police, but decided not to. So some really weird things had been happening around the house. I talked with Sam for a while about it, and he claimed that he had heard some strange things too. Then things got even worse. One night I heard a loud banging on my bedroom door. It was like somebody was trying to break the door down. I didn't want to open it, but it wasn't locked or anything. After it stopped, things went quiet for a while. Then I finally went over and looked. When I opened the door, nobody was there. It was very strange how all these weird things were happening. I didn't even want to live in the house anymore. Then, one night shortly after that, I got added on Snapchat by a guy from our school. I knew him because he was friends with Sam, but I wasn't really friends with him. After adding him back, he texted me and asked me if strange things were happening in our house, and I said yes. The guy then told me that it was all Sam. He said that Sam had told him how he pretends to make the house all scary. He said he did that because he thought it was funny and he didn't like me, and he also hoped that I would get scared and move out. Apparently, this guy had had a falling out with Sam for some reason, and they were not friends anymore. So now this guy wanted me to know the truth. He also said that he had even helped Sam once. I think it was the time when we both heard somebody downstairs. Anyways, I was shocked to hear it, and I wasn't sure if I should feel better or worse about this. I decided to confront Sam about it the next day. At first, he denied it, and then he tried to play it off as a joke. We argued briefly, and then we went our separate ways. For the rest of the time that I lived there, I barely spoke to Sam at all, but also nothing else strange happened. I live alone in a small house that I rent, and this happened just a few weeks ago. So, one night I was watching TV by myself in the living room. I was sitting on the couch and just having a relaxing night. For some context, the living room is at the front end of my house. My couch is against a large living room window which looks out to the front yard. So, as I sat on the couch, the window was directly behind me. It's a very long window that stretches across much of the room. There are curtains on each side that can be closed, but to be honest, I'm too lazy to close them most of the time. So when I go to bed, I just shut the lights off. So there I was, sitting on the living room couch and watching television. Out of nowhere, I heard a knocking coming from right behind me. Somebody was knocking on my window. It really startled me, and I quickly looked back. When I did, I saw this man standing there in the bushes. He was right on the other side of the glass, like 3 feet away from my head. The man was wearing a sweatshirt and a jacket as well. Both hoods were up far, covering most of his face. It was a kind of rainy night, but this still looked super suspicious. I really couldn't see the guy's face at all. Plus, it was really dark out there. The more suspicious thing, though, was that he was standing in my bushes and knocking on my living room window. My house was not super close to the street either. You would have to walk through the whole front yard to get to it. After seeing the guy, I got up from the couch quickly to put some distance between us. I moved back to the edge of the living room. However, the man did not move. The guy still stood there looking at me, but also sort of looking down kind of. He didn't wave or say anything. I kept watching him, and he kept seemingly watching me. After probably a minute or two, I yelled at him. I asked him what he was doing. At first, the guy did nothing. He didn't answer me. He didn't even really react. Then, he moved away from the window to the side, going out of my view. It did not appear as though he was going off my property, but just to another area of the house. I moved out of the living room to try to figure out where he went. He had gone in the direction of my bedroom, so I went there and looked out of the window, but I didn't see him. Then I went around my house looking out of every window. I didn't see the man anywhere. It was possible that he had left my property, and I was hoping that was the case. My front and backyards are not that big, but I do have some trees and bushes. Plus, there really isn't much lighting at all, so I couldn't really see. I went around looking out of the windows from all angles. I went into the kitchen to look into the backyard, and I still didn't see the guy. So I decided to go outside to look. I wasn't trying to hunt him down or anything. I just wanted to verify that he was off my property and the vicinity for my own peace of mind. So I went out the front door and then walked around my house looking. I didn't see the guy at all, and I felt fairly confident that he was gone by now. What that was all about, I didn't know, but I went back inside and tried to relax again before bed. It was pretty late by now, and I had been planning on going to bed pretty soon anyways. I was up in the living room for a little while longer, and nothing happened, so I went to bed. However, I found it very hard to get to sleep. I wasn't tired anymore, and I was feeling paranoid from the strange man at my window. I laid there in bed for probably 30 minutes trying to fall asleep. Then, as I was laying there, I heard the sound of somebody loudly trying to enter my back door. Thankfully, it was locked. I got up and I started turning on all the lights in my house. I also called the cops. Then I started looking out of all the windows. I didn't see anything. I'm guessing that it was the same guy, but he was gone now. When the police got there, I told them about what happened. I gave them a description and they said that they would look around. But after searching my property and the immediate area, they didn't locate him. He hasn't been back since, and I'm hoping that I never see that guy again.
Back in 2014, I joined a Facebook group that was started specifically for people who are from the town I grew up in Southern California. The whole group shared memories of the town, and everyone seemed nice, except for one person. There's always at least one asshole. This guy got on the bad side of one of the admins, whose name was Robert, and ended up being booted from the group. I'll note that I was in my mid-30s at the time, and most of the members were at least 20 years older than me. Robert was approaching 60, and was married with children who were about my age. Robert took a liking to me. Since he was married, I didn't think his friendship would go any further than that, but I was mistaken. He said that I was a down-to-earth girl, and was easy to talk to. He and I exchanged phone numbers, and he would message me quite a bit. However, Robert took it a step further, and found out where I lived, my landline number, and my mother's address in California. He had a subscription to one of those sites that contain information on people, their age, phone numbers, possible relatives, previous addresses, etc. He found out through Facebook when my birthday was, and he sent me flowers. I thanked him, but I started to get suspicious. His behavior was becoming alarming. He started complaining that all his wife wanted from him was his pain pills and money. Around this time, I met the man who would eventually become my husband, and of course, I announced it on Facebook. Robert went into a ballistic rage upon hearing this, saying that I should have known that he was in love with me. I told him, "You're married. Why are you in love with another woman?" He began texting me at least 10 to 20 times a day, going from calling me hateful names to profusely apologizing. I blocked his number, so he started blowing up my landline. Most of the time I kept it unplugged, so I didn't get most of the voicemails that he would leave. One day, out of curiosity, I did listen to some of the voicemails I got. In one of the messages, he claimed that I owed him $13,000. He then started making threats about how he would come to where I lived and would also pay my mother a visit. I blocked him on my landline and informed my mother about the situation. Robert got clever and started texting me from random numbers located all over California. He even sent letters to my home, and nothing he said in those letters made any sense. That's when I decided that I needed a restraining order. I tried twice through my county court, but since I lived in Washington state at the time, the judge wouldn't grant it since we lived in different states. Once Robert found out that I couldn't file a restraining order, he sent me more hateful messages and told me that I would never get rid of him. So I went back to court with the new messages. For this new hearing, Robert mailed in a letter of rebuttal. He claimed that he was a civil servant who had worked at a school district at one time and was an electrician by trade. He also said that he was on disability and couldn't drive longer for more than a half an hour without experiencing excruciating pain, and posed the question, how could he possibly come to Washington state? I told the judge that this wasn't true because he openly posted all day about his motorcycle trips to Malibu on Facebook. Regardless of the evidence, I wasn't granted a restraining order, and I felt failed by the system. I blocked him on all social media, emails, and phone numbers, but he obviously would still call using new numbers. He made a duplicate Facebook page with my profile picture and sent out friend requests to all of my friends. He had my real Facebook profile blocked, and I found out when a friend messaged me, "I got a friend request from you, but I already thought we were friends." My friend then told me that this fake profile of mine was making all kinds of posts talking shit about me. My friend reported it, and thankfully Facebook took it down. I changed my cell phone number, and I eventually moved into a new place. Things died down for a while, but Robert somehow found me on LinkedIn. After that, I straight up deleted LinkedIn and Facebook, and I saw that he even followed me on my YouTube page. I don't know how to remove someone, so I just blocked him there. To wrap up this insane story, I've included a couple of recordings of the messages he left.
Hey, I need you to unblock me and respond to me, please. Would you consider doing that? That's the Christian thing to do, don't you think? Please, I'm not playing around. Bye. Look, if you don't respond to me, you're not leaving me too many choices here, and there only leaves me one, and I don't want to do that, and I don't want to blindside you. I wish you would just talk to me. We could work this out, but obviously you don't want that. But you're not leaving me much of choice, and I won't be going after a paycheck. Bye.
This is a story that took place back when I was a kid. I was probably somewhere between the ages of 8 and 10. At that age, I loved Christmas, mainly because of all the things that I would get. I lived with my parents, brother, and sister in a 2-story home in a typical neighborhood. Each year, we would do lots of decorating inside and outside of the house. Our Christmas tree would go in the corner of our living room and all the presents would go underneath it. On Christmas Eve that year, we went to my grandparents' house, and then we were going to my uncle's on Christmas. That night on Christmas Eve, after we all went to bed, I had a difficult time falling asleep. I usually did when I was a kid because I was always so excited for Christmas. I finally was able to doze off for a bit, but woke up sometime later when it was still the night. I remember just turning over to try to go back to sleep, but then I thought I heard a noise. It sounded like it was coming from downstairs. My bedroom was the closest to the stairs, and even I could barely hear it. I looked at the clock, and it was 2 a.m. I didn't know why anybody would be up at this hour. Being that young and a curious kid, I decided to go and look. I left my bedroom and then walked a few feet to the railing of the stairs that overlooked the living room. I looked down, and everything seemed normal. All of the lights were off, but the lights from the Christmas tree and the few other decorations were on, so I could see a little bit. I looked down at the tree for a little while longer. It was very large, and we always got the biggest tree that we could find. But then I saw somebody come out from behind the tree. It wasn't my dad or brother, but a random guy that I didn't know. As soon as I realized that it was a random guy, I turned and ran. I went to the end of the hallway where my parents' bedroom was. I woke them up and told them that there was some guy in the house. I remember that my dad got up to look. He came back a short time later and said that he saw somebody leaving the house through the window. The police were called, and when they got out to our house, searched all over our property. They didn't find the guy, but they did find that our window was broken. None of us had heard it break, so the guy must have quietly done it somehow. It was a living room window that was broken, and I think that I saw him not long after he got in the house, because nothing was even stolen. I think that he either saw me or heard me, and that scared him off. I'm just really glad that he didn't try to come upstairs or anything. It still really freaked me out knowing that somebody broke in. It took me a long time to be able to fall back asleep, but eventually I was able to. That was by far my craziest Christmas experience. Nothing like that has happened since, much less on Christmas. I still don't know who the guy was though and why he chose our house. I also don't know if the police ever found him. This is something really bizarre that happened to me last winter. I live by myself in a smaller one-story home. The neighborhood that I live in is somewhat typical. However, I know most of the nearby neighbors pretty well and get along with all of them. Last winter, we got a pretty bad snowstorm at one point. It was over a weekend, and it started one night at roughly 5 o'clock. The snow was supposed to last until early the next morning, and we were going to get several inches of it. Everything was normal other than the snowstorm, and I went to bed at about 11 p.m. and then woke up the next morning at probably like 7:30 or 8. My bedroom is at the front side of the house, and as soon as I sat up and looked out of the window, something shocked me. There was a snowman that was built and looking right into my bedroom window. The snowman was very well done and had eyes and a mouth made from buttons. It was probably about 5 feet away from my window. It spooked me at first until I realized what it was. But then, I wondered how it got there. I certainly hadn't made it. It had to have been my next-door neighbor's kids. My next-door neighbors were a husband and wife who had kids in their early teens and middle school ages. They were the only kids in the immediate area of the neighborhood. Still, it seemed kind of unlike them to do that. Why wouldn't they just build it in their own yard? Plus, they were usually well-behaved, and I didn't think that they would even go into my yard without permission. I went outside to snowplow my driveway. When I got out there, I saw my next-door neighbor. His name is Todd, and he was already out using his snowblower. I walked over to him at the end of the driveway and waved. He stopped his snowblower and said that I had a nice snowman in the front yard. I told him that I didn't know how it got there and asked him if his kids had made it. He said no. He told me he had been inside with his kids watching a movie the night before. He assumed that I had made the snowman. We just joked about it after that, though. It was a pretty funny thing, but also a little bit strange. After that, I finished clearing my driveway and went back inside. The temperatures that we were having were in the high 20s all the way up to the mid-30s. This created good snowball or snowman snow. Fast forward to the next morning, I woke up and then went into the kitchen. The kitchen is at the back side of my house, and there's a window out to the backyard. When I looked out of it, there was another snowman. It hadn't been there the day before, and it was facing the back window, looking right at me just a few feet away. Somebody had made another one. This one, like the first, was very well made, but unlike the other one, it had some different props. Instead of just having a face made out of buttons, it had a gardening shovel used as its hand, and it was made to look like it was holding a pitchfork. I realized that the shovel and pitchfork had come from my garage. I went outside and then went to the garage. The back door was left open. Nobody was inside of it though. I was really creeped out now. Somebody was going into my yard in the middle of the night and making snowmen. This time they had entered my garage. I had left the door unlocked by accident, and I made sure to lock it. When whoever it was made a snowman in the front yard, I thought it was funny. But now that it was in the backyard and they went inside of my garage without permission, this was too far. Still, I had no idea who was doing it. At night, I never heard or saw anything. That night, I even looked out of the windows multiple times before going to bed. I didn't see anybody though. The next morning when I got up, both of the snowmen were destroyed. They were just gone and nowhere to be seen. Somebody had tore them down. I was really weirded out by the whole situation. After that, there were no more strange occurrences though. No more snowmen and no more strange things happening. I still wonder to this day who did that. It was about a year ago when my parents and sister went out of state for a sports tournament, and I was left alone in the house for 3 days. I'd never been home by myself for that long, and I thought it would be nice to have some peace and quiet. The first night went by without anything out of the ordinary. I watched a couple of movies, made some popcorn, and went to bed around midnight. I didn't think much of it when I woke up in the middle of the night with an uneasy feeling. It was not anything specific, just a weird sense that someone was watching me. I shrugged it off and went back to sleep. The next day, everything seemed fine. I spent most of the time inside, just relaxing and watching more movies. By the evening, the feeling started to creep up again, like there was someone there, even though I was alone. I checked the house to make sure that all the doors and windows were locked, and everything looked normal. I even walked around the yard for a bit to see if anybody was outside, but I didn't find anything. By the time the third night rolled around, I was starting to get a little jumpy. I woke up again between 2 and 3 a.m. and I heard footsteps outside. It wasn't anything loud, just faint footsteps like somebody was walking on the gravel path outside. My heart started to race a bit, but I convinced myself it was probably just an animal, maybe a raccoon or something. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I couldn't fall asleep again, so I grabbed my shoes and flashlight, and I went outside to check things out and ease my mind. I walked around the house, shining the flashlight around, but there was nothing. I was starting to feel stupid about going outside alone in the middle of the night when I heard something from the woods behind the house. It was faint, but it sounded like a branch snapping, like something was walking through the trees. I don't know what made me do it, but I walked towards the sound. As I got about halfway from my house to the edge of the woods, I heard a loud, blood-curdling scream. I don't know if it was an animal or human, but it's a wild area behind my house, and it could have been a fox or a mountain lion. Either way, I freaked out, ran inside, and locked all the doors and windows. I peered through the curtains, trying to see if I could spot anything or anyone. I opened the curtains to a man standing close to the window, staring directly at me. As soon as he saw me, he turned and sprinted towards the woods. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, so I stayed up and watched more movies, and thankfully nothing else happened that night. When my parents came back the next day, I didn't tell them what happened. Since then, I've been home alone 5 more times, and I've never seen the man again. I don't know what he was doing, and if the scream I heard was related to him or not, or just a coincidence from an animal, but it was a scary night. For a short time period, I used to work as a customer service representative during nights. It was a job that I did from home. I would work my normal job during the day, and then work the night shift at home taking calls. I had a guest room in my apartment that I worked out of, and it was normally pretty easy. I used my guest room as an office, and from like 8 o'clock at night until midnight, I sat at my desk with my headset and my computer. I was able to take calls, help customers for the business that I worked for, and stay at home. I was working a lot at the time to save up money, and I only did 2 jobs at once for several months. For this job though, I wouldn't be getting calls all the time. I'd get maybe like 10 a night, so there was a lot of downtime where I could just relax mostly, and I got paid the whole time, which was good. So, nearing the end of my shift one night, it was shortly after 11 p.m. This was not necessarily a quieter time, but it was just later. I found that there was about the same amount of calls regardless of the time, but on this night I hadn't happened to get a call in a little while. So then I got a phone call and answered, except this was not the normal customer. When I said hello, at first nobody said anything on the other end of the phone. When I said hello again, this time I heard a man's voice start to speak. He did not sound normal though. It was like he was trying to disguise his voice or something. What he said next really creeped me out. The man told me that he was outside my apartment. I said, "Come again?" The man then said that he was right outside and claimed that he could see me. I asked if this was a prank, and he started laughing this creepy laugh. I didn't recognize the voice as anybody that I would know. I asked again why he called. The guy said that he just wanted to let me know that he was right outside my place and that I should go look. I didn't believe him at all. I said, "No, you're not." Then I hung up on him because I was not willing to play games with some prank caller. But then, moments later, there was a knock on my apartment door. Instantly, I was extremely nervous. I had truly thought that it was just a prank call, but now it didn't seem like it. I stayed where I was in my office. Then there was another knock on the door. I decided to get up and go and see who was there. I walked over to my front door, but by the time I got there, I looked out of the peephole and whoever had been there was gone. Then I got another call. When I answered it, it was the same person right away. He gave me another creepy laugh and asked why I didn't answer the door. I asked who it was in a nervous voice, and then he hung up on me. I was so creeped out, fearing that I was being stalked or something, and I called the police. I told them what happened, and they said they would send an officer to my location. As I was waiting for them to arrive, I got another phone call. When I answered it, it was the same person, but just laughter. It was really creepy. Then they hung up again. When the police officer arrived at my apartment, I told him what happened, and he looked all around the building. Unfortunately, he never located who did it. After that, for the rest of my time working that job, nothing else like that happened. I still don't know who did that to me or why. I live alone. This is something that happened just a few months ago. So my apartment is pretty standard for the most part. However, the front door opens right up to the outside, and there's a small grass area there. To the right of that is the parking lot. Then there are several levels of units. Mine is on the first level. I was at home one evening after I had gotten back from work. I was in the kitchen cooking, and right in the middle of that, my doorbell rang. I wasn't able to go over to the door right away, but I stopped what I was doing and then went over there. This was maybe 20 seconds after the bell had rang. When I got there though, I didn't see anybody. I looked out the window to as much as I could see, and there was nobody there. So at that point, I just went back to cooking. I didn't really know who it could be or why somebody would be ringing my doorbell. I figured that it was most likely someone at the wrong apartment though. Nothing else happened for a while. Several hours later, I was in my living room just hanging out. Then the doorbell rang again. I remembered from before and wondered if that person was back. Then the doorbell started ringing again and again, a bunch of times really fast. I was so confused. I got up and started walking over to the door. In the time that I was going over there, the doorbell ringing stopped. Before opening the door though, I made it to the window and then looked outside. When I did, I was surprised to see that nobody was there again. They had been ringing my doorbell so many times in a row like they really wanted me to answer, and now they were just gone. I didn't know what to make of it. I looked around for several minutes but didn't see anyone. After that, I went back to what I was doing. I only stayed up for maybe another hour if that. Then I was tired and decided to go to bed. I started turning off the lights in my apartment, but before heading to my bedroom, I went over to the front door and looked out of the window one last time. However, this time I saw something. There was this tall and kind of thin man just standing there a few feet away from my door. He wasn't facing me, but kind of to the side. He didn't appear to really be doing anything though. The guy was wearing all black clothing, and I had no idea who he was. I thought that this was maybe the person who kept ringing my doorbell. It just seemed really suspicious though. I watched him for several minutes. The man just stood there and sort of looked around. Then he started walking away slowly. He went in the grass area out front, and then he walked across the quiet street that was there. After crossing, he walked right into the woods. There was no path or anything. He just went right in, and the woods there is very thick. I was so confused and also creeped out. Since then, I haven't had any more strange doorbell rings or anything. I also haven't seen the guy, and I'm still wondering who he is and what he was doing. I'm also wondering why he just went in the woods like that.
Between 8th to 10th grade, I was deeply involved in a small Minecraft building server. The average age of the players was probably 15 to 17 years old, and we Skyped almost every day for hours. We quickly grew close and would follow each other on other social media platforms. I became really close with one member in particular. His name was Peter. He was in the same grade as me, and I heard rumors that he might have had a crush on me. Rumors that he denied. I found the idea laughable, since we only knew each other online. We were in the same grade, but not in the same school, so I brushed it off, and things were okay for a while. But eventually something felt off. During our conversations, I started catching him in small lies, which bothered me. Deciding it was time to distance myself, I stopped talking to him. A few months later, after no contact, Peter texted me out of the blue. He said that he might transfer to my high school to qualify for an in-state college tuition. His plan was to live alone and support himself while still in high school. My stomach dropped. This felt very wrong and out of nowhere. Still trying to stay calm, I told him that his plan was absolutely insane and pointed out how oddly convenient it was that he just happened to choose the school that I attended. But he insisted that this was a coincidence and that his plan would work. I really hoped that he was bluffing, just messing around. But a short time later, he claimed that he had already purchased plane tickets to visit my high school and stay in my town. Fear washed over me as I realized that Peter was serious and had an unhealthy attachment to me. He wasn't bluffing. To my horror, he posted a Snapchat photo from the airport. He asked me to meet up while he was in town, but I denied. Later on, his Snapchat account showed him touring my high school, taking videos and pictures, likely hoping that I would see them. Fortunately, I was home with pneumonia that day and didn't have to face him. Over the next few days, I was on edge, terrified that he would show up at my door. Luckily, he never figured out where I lived, and eventually he flew back home, abandoning his plan. Shockingly, the rest of our online group never thought his behavior was creepy. I felt like I was going crazy for finding it severely disturbing. I hoped my rejection of the meetup and continued silence would end things. But 2 years later, after I committed to my dream college, Peter popped up again. I had, foolishly, kept following him on social media to monitor if he was ever near me. Then I saw it, a photo of him posing in front of my college's library. Captioned, "Transferring here is definitely the move." I don't know if he ever did, but I never ran into him on campus. A few months later, he found out that I had a boyfriend and contacted me on Skype for the first time in 2 years. "Do you think he's going to protect you?" Out of fear, I blocked him and unfollowed him on all social media. I admit that I made mistakes back then. I was young, scared, and surrounded by people telling me this wasn't a big deal. He hasn't tried to contact me since, but that doesn't mean he isn't still watching me.
Several years ago, I worked a temporary job as a part-time security guard. It was a job that I was not really qualified for, but I guess there wasn't really any requirements. There was this building in the sort of downtown area of the city that I lived in. The building was a mix of some offices and some other businesses. It went up several stories and connected to other buildings as well. During the day, the building was open and there would be somebody who worked at the main desk. Many people would walk through the building during the day, but at night it was closed, and for some reason they still needed a security guard. I would literally just sit in the desk all night and do nothing. Nobody ever came to the building, and I never had to talk to anyone. I wore a security guard uniform that was similar to a cop's outfit, but I was certainly no cop, not even close. The only training I got really was to call the cops if anything happened. But on the other hand, I could just sit down and go on my phone for hours and get paid for it. I could play games and watch YouTube videos and do whatever I wanted really. I would also walk around the lobby area and some of the connecting hallways to get my steps in. I didn't mind the job much because it was just part-time, so it didn't really get old. Anyways, one night I was working, and by this point it was probably after midnight. I know that I was at my desk like usual when somebody knocked on the door. This was something that had never happened before. There were 2 glass doors that were at the main entrance. Obviously they were locked now. I wasn't really sure why somebody would be knocking on the doors, but I felt like it was my job to go and check. They also tried to open the doors as I got up, so I walked over to see who was there. When I arrived, I saw a relatively young woman standing there outside. It was a fairly cold night and a little rainy as well. By this time, really nobody else was out walking on the sidewalks or streets. When I got to the door, she was motioning for me to open it. I knew that I was to never let anybody in the building after close, so I tried to tell her through the glass that we were closed and she could not come in. She didn't seem to get it though, and motioned that she could not hear me and for me to open the door again. So reluctantly, I did. I opened the door just a small amount, and I told the woman that the building was closed. She said something like she was very cold and needed to use the restroom quick. I told her that the building was off limits, and I gave her directions to a building nearby that was actually open. She did not seem satisfied, but accepted what I said and started to walk away. Then I closed the door and went back over to my desk. That was the first time that anybody had ever come to the door while I was working. In fact, it was the first time that I had ever interacted with anybody at the job. However, not more than 20 minutes later, I heard a knocking at the door again. This was really weird, but then I figured that it was probably the same woman there again for some reason. I walked over and saw that there was now a man standing right outside the door. He had a hooded sweater on, but that didn't seem very suspicious because the weather would call for that. The man knocked again and waved me over. I walked over to him, and then without really giving it a second thought, I opened the door a crack. I was going to tell him the same thing that I told the woman. However, literally the second that I opened the door, the man barged his way in, pushing the door into me. Then he pushed me over, knocking me to the ground. Before the door swung back and closed, another man forced his way inside and stepped over me as I was on the ground now. I did not have any weapons, and I wasn't getting paid enough to stand there and fight the guys. So I got up and quickly ran out the door and left the building. The men were now both inside to do who knows what. I ran a safe distance away and I called the police. I walked around the sidewalks freezing cold, hoping that the men didn't come after me or anything. Soon though, the police got there and I flagged them down. 3 cars with a total of 5 officers arrived on scene, and some stayed and talked with me while others entered the building. And thankfully they were able to apprehend the 2 men who were still inside the building. They also tracked down that same woman who I had talked to earlier. Apparently she was the getaway driver for the men and was in on it, which made sense. After that I went back to work, but quit a short time after. That was a little too much action for me. I'm still mad at myself for opening the door and letting the guys in. I had just talked to the woman and that had gone fine though, so I wasn't really thinking. I guess maybe their original plan was to try to get her in the building. When that didn't work, they decided to go in by force.